Hello everybody, this is Lesson 4, Part 1, Rec 250, Online Summer Session 1. So this is Lesson 4, Part 1, Lesson 4, Part 1, Rec 250, Summer Session 1, Online. Hopefully everyone is doing alright. I'm going to do a little bit of review, and then I'm going to go ahead and get into Lesson 4, Part 1, Information. A couple things I want to mention. If you're interested in participating in the ropes course shadowing position, where you go up and you shadow a ropes course for the day, please send me an email as I have current dates. I'll also post those on Blackboard, but please send me an email so I can give you some additional instructions about going up to NAU and shadowing or watching a ropes course for a full day, which will give you full credit in one of the 3 assignments that I currently have posted for this class. You'll get full credit for one of those assignments, so you'll get a pass on either test or the ELP project. Okay, so send me an email with that. I'm going to go ahead and look at the review now. Now, everything we've been talking about thus far, you'll probably see on your midterm, including some readings from the book. So as long as you're listening to lecture videos and reading the material assigned in the book, you should be doing just fine in this class. Make sure to email me questions at j7win@yahoo.com, j7win@yahoo.com. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So we started off the class, talked about what is a leader, and had some discussion about leadership and the non-anxious influencing presence. Non-anxious influencing presence is a great definition for a leader. Non-anxious influencing presence. As there are many definitions, and we've talked some about those. We talked about the difference between a technical facilitator and an interpersonal, skill-based facilitator. With that first quote in Lesson 1, we're talking about, someone can have a list of rules or a list of activities or a list of programs, just a big tool bag, and there's nothing wrong with that, but someone who doesn't possess interpersonal skills, meaning the ability to read their group, the ability to empathize, the ability to be a good listener and an effective communicator, if you don't have those interpersonal skills, you're eventually going to run out of games or run out of programs. You're not going to be effective. You need strong interpersonal skills. We also talked about what a guide is, what an instructor is, what a facilitator is. Your guide, instructor, facilitator, all 3 different roles. We're primarily looking at the facilitator. What is the facilitator? Facilitating a process, moving someone or a group from point A to point B, whatever that is. There might be times where you're kind of autocratic or very authoritative in that leadership, and there's other times where you're more laissez-faire and you step back a little bit, or maybe you're more democratic, kind of right in the middle. Then there's times where you're really actively leading them, and there's other times where you're really just providing a solid or beneficial, very positive opportunity for your group to learn. We talked about last week about being responsible to and not for your group. Yes, of course you're responsible for your group to some degree. I'm not talking about those minor things. What I'm talking about is in philosophical terms. You're responsible to, not for, their learning. Okay? All you can do is set up the best environment and the best atmosphere possible for your group to experience personal growth and learning. If things go wrong outside of your control and or people just aren't interested, there is no motivation for them to learn, then you're not going to have the most effective program you could possibly have. Now, is that about you as a leader? No, it isn't. You did the best job that you could in providing the best opportunity for your group to learn and grow. Now, there's more to that, but in a nutshell, it kind of just shows us the difference between being responsible to and being responsible for. Okay, it's different than like you're teaching school. Teaching school and your elementary school teacher. What are you responsible for? What are you responsible to? We're talking about leadership, and we're talking about facilitation-based leadership. You are really just responsible to. Okay, to, not for. Other things we talked about Outward Bound and Kurt Hahn, the beginning of Outward Bound, and some of the experiential learning philosophy, some of the educational philosophy behind adventure education, the adventure environment, where we see leadership clearly displayed as well as tested in a variety of outdoor mediums, where we can take the concepts that pertain to leadership and test them and really see them in the adventure medium, in the adventure program, in adventure programming, and in adventure education. They're sometimes more fuzzy and difficult to see for in the coaching realm, in the political realm, in the speaking and touring kind of lecture-based series realm. We can really dissect leadership and the various components of leadership on a facilitator level, and very practical tool skill-based level, in the adventure medium, in the adventure atmosphere, in the adventure environment. So we were talking about Outward Bound and Kurt Hahn and kind of how all of the adventure programming and adventure education got started. And we can see from its very roots that it's a character-based, interpersonal skill developing type of a history, which is exciting. It shows us there's a real moral fabric, a real character development fabric based in all of adventure education, adventure programming, adventure mediums. And so we talked about the 5 social declines. Okay. We also talked about value-centered education versus intellectual-centered education. Now, it's important to learn things, absolutely. You learn things every day, but specifically in school and college, you have to learn. There's things you need to learn. But you also need to learn about yourself. And it goes further than just taking a psychology class or maybe doing a personality assessment. As I talked before, personality is a different realm than your character realm, okay, or where your interpersonal skills lie. You need to learn about who you are and how you work with others, how you lead others, how you follow, and how you're part of a team. So we went on. We talked about the adventure wave model. We talked about the endless adventure wave, or this idea that a facilitator always sees this ongoing wave. They see the bedrock as information supporting the program, and then they see the brief activity debrief, rolling up and down, and so there's always something you're closing, something you're preparing for. We talked about goals and how goals are good for groups and individuals to help them go past any preconceived limitations or any things that they're struggling with. And we usually talk about those in a debrief, okay, and then bring them back up in a brief, then an activity. And please don't misunderstand that an activity is not something that lasts for a long period of time. An activity can simply be a question and answer segment or a video break during a seminar. That's an activity. It's doing something different than just listening to the leader lecture about something. Okay, so, and it can also be more of a traditional activity, or it can be a team building activity, outdoor recreation activity. When you look at coaching, any activity has to do with any drill that you're doing, what the coach says prior to the drill, what the coach says during the drill, what the coach says post-drill. Brief, activity, debrief. Brief, activity, debrief. So whatever leadership position you're in, whatever that you're in currently, you can apply this model to. So we talked about that. What we're going to do, what we're going to do today is going to talk a little bit about debriefing, and then we're going to go into the different types or classifications of groups that you'll be working with, which test your facilitation skills. We'll get to that in a minute. But first we're going to look at debriefing. Now, I think we talked a little bit already about brief, activity, debrief, where a brief is where you're setting up for the activity. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what the rules are. It's going to be very clear, very concise. you put out expectations to some degree out there. Here's what I expect. Here's what needs to happen. And then activity. You have the non-anxious influencing presence, where, say, you're coaching soccer and they're doing the drill. You may be encouraging a few folks. You may be giving some constructive feedback. However you coach, that's okay. So you've got some involvement during the activity, and then there's the debrief. Now I say, well, gosh, not every drill or not every activity in my leadership, in my leadership day to day here, is a debrief necessary. Yeah, that's no big deal. Okay, just know that there's time slotted for it, and that's what the model says. As well as that you come down off the activity, you can do a debrief. You don't have to, but eventually there'll be some type of debrief, and at the end of every practice, there usually always is, and sometimes in the middle, sometimes various places. Okay, but the wave continues. So after the activity, there's a debrief, and that's what I want to talk about, and really try to emphasize the importance of discussion and reflection. Remember earlier talking about last week learning by doing. Now, learning by doing is not nearly as effective if somebody stops and thinks about their behavior and their actions. So I go through an experience, I do something, I have a behavior, and then I think, what have I done? Okay, how did that impact somebody else? How did that impact me? Could I have done better? What could I do differently? Okay, and this has to do with problem solving, and this has to do with your ability to look within and say, is this balanced? Okay, am I doing something correct here? Is this good for me? What else do I need to do? Etc. It's that self-reflection period, which can happen with yourself, with one other leader, in a group of leaders. Okay, so it can happen in a variety of ways, but the important thing is that there's the opportunity. There's an opportunity for you to self-introspect, to look inside and say, what needs to change here? What do I need to do? How can I be supportive? How can I help somebody else? Okay, this is this reflection discussion period, which we call the debrief. And so I'll be back to talk about that.